And good afternoon. Welcome into another edition of the Buffaloes podcast here on gshow.ca. I'm your host, Graham, the G Show Forsyth. Crazy times continue here in Manitoba with a bunch of games being scheduled in different leagues that we're involved with. Has made it for a fun weekend. We still have our semifinals, game 3 scheduled today with the spot in the finals on the line between Vincent Massey and Sturgeon Heights in the Winnipeg High School Hockey League. Of course, Pilot Mountain Hockey Academy, lots to talk about uh, in regards to them since this is their podcast. Junior hockey for us could very well be canceled tonight, but hey, we'll have to wait and see. Crazy weather continues here in February at the end of it here in Manitoba. But as for your favorite prep hockey school in the province of Manitoba, in small town Pilot Mound, for their hockey academy, their teams were in action this past weekend. As I'm going to have a chance to talk to Gordie Tumilson about that, as well as talking a bit about their upcoming games, and yeah, also getting into some recruitment stuff. We also have another guest joining today's episode. She's not a hockey player, not even a coach, but a physiotherapist, the lead physiotherapist at Pilot Mound, and Julie Medwid also joins this edition of the show, and it's great to have a chance to talk to someone like that, someone in a field that's very important to athletes at the end of the day, and also cool to hear her backstory on how she got into physiotherapy and all that good stuff coming up later on. But first off, Gordie Tumilson is going to join this edition of the Buffaloes podcast this week for episode 23, season 3, as we talk all things Buffaloes, as always. Gordie Tumilson on this week's edition of the Buffaloes podcast, as always, to talk
Oh, can't
things.
hear. Okay, yeah. Couldn't hear you there for a moment.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Gordie Tumilson joining this edition of the Buffaloes podcast. Gordie, the U15s, we'll start off with them getting right into it as they ended up having a 3-0 weekend going down to Abbotsford, British Columbia, playing teams in OHA, Penticton, Star Academy, and the North Shore Warriors. Pretty sweet to see them come out with a perfect record over the weekend.
Yeah, that's not typically what we do when we go to BC, and those teams are pretty tough. So for us to come up with 3-0 is great. That's again proof positive of the extra work that goes into getting these teams ready all season long. It's the end of February now, and they're as good as they're going to be, and obviously they played pretty darn well against normally really tough competition. So good on our guys to continue that process and sort of begin their entry into the playoff season on a very high note.
14 goals combined in their last two games of the weekend against Star Academy and North Shore, and the most goals they gave up all weekend long was four in that 8-4 win they had against North Shore. So to see them get better and better throughout the weekend, where they're able to put up back-to-back wins as well, where they won by 4 goals, showing once again that these teams in Pilot Mound seem to end off their weekend strong.
Yeah, it's incredible. The coaches, of course, when you're coaching a team, like Colin and Brad are doing that, and people managing it and watching it every day, don't realize that the kids are just getting better. And they do get better. And then all of a sudden, poof, you go to Abbotsford and you're maybe expecting to get blown away somewhere along the way, and you're doing the blowing away part. I mean, that's wonderful. And it really makes the guys that are, running the organization, the coaches, all those kinds of people, of course, the kids and the parents feel wonderful about the fact that they've done all this hard work. They've done all these things all year long. They weren't at the top of the pecking order at the start, and still not quite at the top, but they're a lot further along than people would have given them that opportunity at the start of the season. So good on our guys to persevere, just be strong. This is how you develop into a strong hockey player when you just hang in there and get better, and then all of a sudden your teammates do the same thing, and then you're winning games that you might not otherwise have won 2 months ago.
And Pilot Mountain has been putting together a ton of wins as of late, dating back to February 13th, as it was a strong end to their month, and they're not even done just yet, Gordie. They're taking on Notre Dame in the last 2 days of February, coming up on Friday and Saturday, and then the first day of March on Sunday afternoon, all down in Wilcox, Saskatchewan. As for the U17s, we'll get into the weekend that they just had, Gordie, as they took on different teams and teams like Pacific Coast, Burnaby Winter Club, as well as Wenatchee Wild. Spoke about them last week. Had Gavin and Yuki on the show, of course, as we talked about a bit about them. But yeah, go into their weekend, how things panned out for the U17s.
Well, they won a couple, lost a couple, and yeah, and so it was a mixed weekend for them, and that's kind of predictable. Just depends on the competition, of course, every weekend. So, you're not playing teams that are worse than you or much better than you all the time, or a lot better. So, yeah, good weekend. It was a safe weekend for them in terms of travel and all of those kinds of things. So, not horribly eventful. Again, the kids plugging away to try and catch that last playoff spot in the Division One section of this prep league, and they're working their way towards that. But it might have slipped away on them, but not just because of this past weekend, certainly because of other games. But nonetheless, good weekend for them in preparation for playoffs.
And this is a theme that's been a regular theme on the show, but again, it's not in the exact context as I'm about to bring up what happened. But Burnaby, the Burnaby Winter Club,
Yeah.
smokes Pilot Mountain 9-2. Pilot Mountain comes back with a 7-4 victory against Wenatchee Wild. So once again, no matter what the outcome was in the weekend, Pilot Mountain proven again that they can bounce back and finish strong.
Well, again, resiliency. The people talk about having difficulties at different times during the season, whether it be in amateur sports, in any sport, in life, in professional hockey, whatever we're talking about. When you have difficulties and you hang in there and overcome them, that's a bonus, and that's part of growing up and part of being a tough hockey player. Again, bodes well for them as they as scouts look at them and as people look at them as individuals moving into drafts and hockey player selection situations for junior teams down the road. They're looking at players that bounce back. They don't want players that pout. They want guys that go out there and play hard all the time and battle and yeah, you're going to get beat by some of those superstar teams. Good for them and carry on. And you come back the next day, you forget about yesterday and it's now today and let's go beat these guys and you do and that's really nice. I mean, it takes a lot of work on the coaches, a lot of energy out of the coaches, a lot of frustration for everybody, and when you lose, and then it feels good the next day. So yeah, don't linger too long on the negative. Carry on with good positive stuff.
Well, it's a long season too, right?
Oh,
And losses are bound to happen. It's never going to be perfect. Even the best teams in the world don't go perfect, right? So one of the greatest strengths I think an athlete can have is, I've grown up over time just watching sports and being around the game is athletes being able to have a short memory and being able to bounce back and fight through, the adversity when things don't go exactly your way. Pilot Mountain looking for their efforts against Wenatchee the Wild to carry over into their upcoming games this weekend as they'll be taking on the Indigenous Sports Academy down at Blackjack Stewart Arena as their home for the rest of the regular season before playoffs hit. As for the U18 male prep Buffaloes, looked like they had a pretty solid weekend for themselves. Close competitive games and coming away with a victory in there. Take us through the past weekend for the U18s.
yeah. Again, this very resilient team, as we've come to know since the beginning of the season, just keeps playing hard, and they're getting the most out of their players, and they're competing against the top teams in the league, and the top teams in the league are not overwhelming them. They're hanging in there really nicely. So good on our guys to get a win and a couple of close losses. And again, close losses can still mean a win sometimes. The puck bounces your way. Puck luck makes a bit of a difference. Usually the better team wins those games. Not so much for Canada's Olympic team, where they seem to
Mm.
be the better team, but we didn't win that one. But however, at the end of the day, when most of the time the best team wins, but when the other team hangs in there, good things can happen, and they seem to happen more often with this U18 team than than we thought might at the beginning of the season. So good on them to continue to be strong and tough and resilient, and they get some wins and they feel good about themselves.
Gordie, I was just or starting to forget about the Team
Sorry.
Canada loss. You brought it back up again. Eh? You had to do that. But no, in all honesty, I mean, again, big bounce back for that squad during a weekend too where due to travel I believe Friday's game was canceled, correct? So
Postponed, actually, just postponed.
postponed
Yeah.
because yeah, it's going to be coming up in their next matchup. Just saw that on their social media, or one of their next matchups. But yeah, battling Pacific Coast Hockey Academy, only losing 5-4, and then you're able to go out and shut out a team in North Shore 3-0 in that early morning game too. Speaks to this group. Seems like they're up to any sort of challenge this season.
Well, the early morning thing's kind of fun because the kids out in Pilot Mountain get up early in the morning. They've got a schedule that's it's amazing. The neat part about the kids coming out of Pilot Mountain is their time management skills go from a teenager kid, kind of la-di-da, going around doing what they're doing every day, to a real, almost a business person. They got up, they got breakfast, they get school, boom, they get practice, they got fitness, they get boom, and then back to the rink and a video session and in the evening classroom, and my gosh, they just go, go, go all the time. So. Sometimes I think they do too much, but I mean that's something they try and balance all the time for the kids with sleep and rest and all that stuff. But yeah, so early mornings, it doesn't seem to bother our guys as much as it does maybe some of the other teams because our guys are used to it. That 6 o'clock wake up, 7 o'clock on the ice thing for a lot of them, a lot of times is whoa, that's that's not exciting for teenagers, but it becomes a habit and it becomes a good one when you have to play these games at this time of the morning. And so you can win some of those because the other teams are still asleep and you're not. That's good on us to win whenever we can. It's a good thing.
And I think another point to be made about that is, the further you make it in pro and hockey, you're not getting up late in the morning, right? You're getting up early to
Uh-huh.
get in the gym, start your day off, whatever the case may be.
Yep.
And yeah, I think that that's great that Pilot Mound, specifically in this case, has been able to give players that type of experience too, building that routine. And I think that's something that may not be talked about really that much. But as for the U18s, coming up next, they're going to have some more tough opponents to end off the season, but they've been, like we said, managing pretty well against everyone they've played for most of this season, surprising us, dating back to the start of the year. But Gordie, for the U18 female prep Buffaloes, they were down in Winnipeg this past weekend. OHA Black, Delta Black, and Shawnigan Lake School in three of their last four games of the season, as they only got one left on the schedule as of now against RHA Winnipeg on March 8th. But take us through how this past weekend shook out for the female preps.
Yeah, it was a 1-2 weekend. They started off with a win, beat OHA in a tight one, 5-4, and then they did lose the last two games. However, played well, and they showed that they've got that sort of keep on going. Doesn't matter what the sort of results have been. Mentality that again, that's that sort of mental resiliency we talk about. You can have physical resiliency, but having mental resiliency is really hard, and the girls have shown that they keep plugging away, despite not a very great season in terms of the win-loss column. But they've scored some more goals lately, and that's a bonus. for them because they've been pretty lacking in that side of the game. But in the last while, so maybe in the playoffs, as they get in there and start to play some of those games in the playoffs against that Division Two group that they're going to play, they might surprise some folks with a little more offense than the other teams are waiting for or expecting. And so we're looking forward to a few surprises there once the playoffs begin for them.
Yeah, we know their goaltending. It's always talented down in Pilot Mountain. This
Yep.
year, it's no different with Adama and Hall. And in terms of the goal scoring, like overall, of course, the goals are way down. But when you look at it, there's only three players that don't have goals, and one of those players has played only 16 games. But Rory Perrin specifically, I feel like has to be that big time player that leads the way for Pilot Mountain come playoff time, right, Gordie, for her to step up and hopefully her teammates, do their jobs well enough around her and that top end talent that this team does have. She showed out huge this weekend in Pilot Mountain's win. Your thoughts on the importance of her performance moving forward?
Well, obviously, any top end player like Rory is really important. I mean, they've got it. Your best players got to be your best players, at least at whatever they do. And she's not only a goal scorer, she's also a penalty killer and a power play player, and passes the puck, gets assists, and does all those things. What we don't have is a lot of accompaniment for her. We do lack. I mean, it's a pretty fair distance between her and the next people with points, and then it drops off even further after a couple three. So we just don't have a lot of accompaniment for her, and that takes a little bit away from her game, at least in terms of scoring this year. Um, should make something clear that even though she hasn't got a zillion points like some of the other players in the league might have, because they're playing with better players all the time. The scouts don't care about that. The scouts know what a good goal scorer looks like. They know what a player with heart and soul, good hands, good feet, good head. They know what all that feels like and looks like. They know Rory's a good player, and they know there's a bunch of other good players on that team. So my expectation is that every one of the graduating players will move on to a university or a college team, as they should, because they've learned a lot at Pilot Mount and previous years in their own programs at home, and they've come here and they've got those kinds of skills and that mental acuity that allows them to be better players going forward. And so, yeah, we look at results and we say, okay, that's what that is, whatever that is for whichever team we're talking about. But moving forward, all of our kids come away with being better people, being stronger, more resilient people, tougher when on the mental side, and boy, and in the emotional side, and boy, does that mean a lot when the tough get going. That's when you need the tough guys, they come through.
The 2009 Morden Manitoba product, she
Yeah.
has potential to return to Pilot Mountain next
Yep.
year, and I'm sure that they'd be delighted to have her back, Gordy. She's like you've talked about a player that has been a big difference maker for this team this season for Pilot
Yep.
Mountain. Into the marketing side of things, let us know, myself, the viewers, anything new in the developments in Pilot Mountain.
Well, we've got our goalie kid coming up from Birmingham, Alabama, the first guy to come up from that part of the world, and I think ever. And that's through a local, former local player, Austin Lotz, who played out of St. Adolphe, Manitoba, and played in the high-end AA program. Was drafted by Everett Silvertips when he was 16, and moved on through professional hockey and ended up playing the last couple of years in Birmingham in that Southern Hockey League. And so Austin's been sort of running a goalie program pretty heavy duty over the last 5 years, growing that into Jacksonville, Florida. Now we're starting to look at other players as well. And we have a line now on players coming from there to Pilot Mound, we think. And it'll be the elite players that come out of that part of the world. And it'll be a place where they get to feel pretty good about their future. And so we got a young guy named Tristan Lee, is a 16-year-old who's going to come up here and check us out. We're going to check him out, see what goes on there, and he's going to go back and be able to tell really nice stories about Pilot Mound, the people, the facilities, and and it's in April, so he's coming up, so it won't be as cold. And and that because I think that might scare some of those southern kids away, although it really doesn't. But anyhow, we've got that going on. We're still working very hard over in Europe. We think we have a second scout in Europe, and working a young guy, another young guy working hard over there. So that's great. We are a bit lacking in North America yet. So again, if there's anybody out there thinking about scouting or knows somebody that's really into hockey and just loves it and wants to go to the rink and watch and do some things, we there's a little bit of pay in it for the kids that we sign, but it's the love of the game that really drives the scouts. So we're looking for those kinds of people.
You heard the man. Be sure to reach out to Pilot Mountain Hockey Academy. All the information can be found on their website, pilotmountainhockeyacademy.com. Gordie, I'll leave you off with this question. You just pointed to North America as a place where you guys are trying to tap more into the markets, of course, within North America. And I look back to, I guess, what I've been seeing online about how the USA hockey development is really being praised in terms of them starting that program up, the US national development team and that program in the early 2000s. And it's led to a bunch of great things for U.S. hockey, right? More golds at the World Juniors as time has gone along, finally dethroning Canada for the gold medal this year, no matter what our thoughts are about that game or not. So, looking at places more in the USA, like you said, on the goaltending side of things, is that something that Pilot Mound is looking to tap more into the U.S. specifically, given how strong their development's been at the youth level?
Well, yeah, I mean, hockey's a much bigger sport today than it was 10 years ago and 20 years ago and so on and so forth, as well as in Europe and other places. But specifically with the US, we're entering into a program on the girls' side where we're hoping to contact every player that is on the NASC coach or NSCA coaches website for players who have deemed themselves interested in moving on in hockey, and in particular the girls program. So we're kind of focusing on that right away because of the some of the sort of lesser accomplishing girls teams that we've had in the last couple of years. But that doesn't preclude anybody else. We're looking everywhere. Obviously, the Americans have done a great job with some of that sort of high-end talent that they've developed. They've made some teams. Well, I'm not sure that's a good thing. So because sometimes the people below that don't get the kind of attention that they need to get to continue on. So there's depth in the program. I think Canada has a lot of depth. We're equal in terms of the high end, and I think we've got a lot more depth still in our hockey program. We might have 10 teams that are pretty good. They might have three or four. But that's okay. I mean, everybody's working their way up. Again, the Europeans are doing the same thing, and so and the Asians and the Australians and all that stuff. So yeah, but in the States, we are looking for more players. We don't know sometimes how some of the politics and what's going on down there. I know we lost a couple of really good players last year because the folks lost their jobs. That they had great jobs and then they lost them because of some political scenarios, and so at the end of the day, we sort of suffered on that in that regard. But we are looking for more players out of the States and everywhere. So yep, it's a hotbed right now, and yeah, we'd love to have more kids come from the excited States for sure.
Politics and the prices of equipment and just hockey in general. I mean,
Ooh.
all these things, right, Gordy? It sucks because, I mean, my favorite sport in the world, your favorite sport, a lot of people's favorite sport here in Canada specifically, sucks that it's not as accessible as it could be. But that's a discussion for another day. Always great to talk with Gordie Tumilson on this edition for another edition of the Buffaloes podcast. Gordie, until next time, we're going to talk more Buffaloes, more marketing, recruitment, and whatever else that is going on down in Pilot Mound. You take care, and we'll see you in about a week or so.
Thanks, Graham. Appreciate it.
Always great catching up with Gordie Tumilson, and going to be great to catch up with him again next week to talk, as we usually do, all things Buffaloes, from the games to recruitment, marketing, all that good stuff. Julie Medwid's going to be joining the show up next, but first we're going to throw it to a commercial break on this edition of the Buffaloes podcast on gshow.ca or gshow.ca and gshow productions on our YouTube channel. Can Central Sports Cards and Memorabilia offers the widest selection of sports cards and signed memorabilia in the city. For dedicated casual and new collectors, Can Central Sports Cards and Memorabilia has everything a collector could ask for. Everything we sell is stored with care, and with help from our knowledgeable team, we'll help you find exactly what you're looking for. We carry Upper Deck hockey card brands like Series 1 and 2, The Cup, Ultimate, SPA, and plenty more. So what are you waiting for? Come down to Can Central Sports Cards and Memorabilia, Winnipeg's premier sports cards and memorabilia store. Julie Medwid joining this edition of the Buffaloes podcast. Julie is on the medical staff down in Pilot Mound, and she has her own practice as well, South Central Physiotherapy. Julie, thank you so much for taking the time and joining the show. I'm excited to hear about your story. I think our viewers are as well. Let us know how you exactly, I guess, got your start in this field of physiotherapy.
Yeah, thank you so much, Graham. I became a physiotherapist in 2018. I was kind of one of the weird kids that decided out of high school that, yeah, this is the right fit for me. I've always loved exercise. I was actually a dancer growing up. And so, yeah, physical activity and exercise for me was always just something that I was very passionate about. So when I went off to university, I wanted to do kinesiology, exercise science, and yeah, obviously fell in love with it and learned all things exercise, and then pursued a master's in physiotherapy. And yeah, 2018, I graduated and moved out to Pilot Mound, where at the time my boyfriend, now husband, had grew up and where his family is from. So. Yeah, long story short of how I became a physiotherapist.
Right, and kind of seems like, I mean, the old saying goes, everything kind of works out for a reason, and cool that you were able to meet your husband down at Pilot Mound, a place that you've been since 2018. But just going into, I guess, your history as a dancer, Scottish Highland dancing for 16 years. You spent time in that sport. Take me through that experience. I'm not sure if I've ever heard of that exactly.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's you know what, it's not like your classic ballet or jazz dance. A lot of people are familiar with the classical training, right? This is more of a cultural dance, part of the Scottish heritage. Yeah, and it's, I would explain it as like the physicality of um, going out and doing a really hard shift, right? With hockey, like it's high intensity, short kind of duration dances, and you felt like you just like sprinted by the end of the dance. So yeah, it was great. It was great to grow up in that style of dance. The the additional piece of it being a cultural kind of really nice to kind of connect to your heritage. I have a Scottish kind of heritage, obviously a mixed bag being Canadian, but I some Scottish heritage. And yeah, I used to teach dance. I competed across Canada, and yeah, I just kind of shaped my the skills that I see in a lot of these athletes that I work with the hockey academy, the mental preparedness and putting in the hard work. The time you put in practice pays off when you're in competition. If you have a bad dance, right? If you completely mess up, you have to shake it off because the next one's coming up. And if you don't have that, ability to do that, then it can affect you the rest of your competition, right? So
Right.
yeah, so yeah, I have only wonderful things to say about my experience as a Highland dancer.
Oh, no question. And I think that's a cool perspective in terms of you kind of, realizing those skills kind of apply to other sports, right? The mental side of
Mhm.
things and all that stuff, right? And I mean, just your time in the sport and like you said, having an interest in the medical side of things. Is that kind of what I guess pushed you into to going into physiotherapy, your life experience beforehand heading into it?
Yeah, again, a fairly unlikely journey. In a way, a lot of people choose physio because they've had a lot of injuries themselves. Um, I was fairly lucky and maybe very avoidant of situations that would be at risk for injury. So yeah, I didn't experience a ton of injuries myself, but what I did, what inspired me to do physiotherapy, not just the exercise as medicine, but the medical perspective, seeing how health conditions interact with the body, or how healing timeframes and structures, the anatomy, the physiology of the body, biomechanics, how joints move under load, and I also, with my experience with teaching dance, like I loved working on instructing and educating and teaching, and uh, and honestly didn't want to be. I would have pursued maybe nursing or becoming a doctor, but I didn't want to do night shifts.
Right.
So,
No doubt.
right. So physiotherapy, it just, in my mind, just fit all the areas of where my passions lie and how I like to show up for people. And being able to take my practice to a small town. I think I always knew I would end somewhere small. I like small communities. I like the sense of community. So, yeah. So yeah. I do feel like I left out. I feel like everything kind of connected. So.
Right. And I mean, speaking about that strong sense of community, definitely one of the big aspects, the big appeals of Pilot Mound is just how community based they are and how community based that program is, the academy. Like you said, you started back there late 2000s, right? 2018. Still, of course, with Pilot Mound on their staff. Take me through that journey. What that's been like to work with all these different athletes, both on the male and female side of the game.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's um I, I I do feel quite privileged being able to work with athletes in a small town. Like it is a unique opportunity. I don't, coming to Pilot Mound, I didn't initially anticipate this would be an opportunity. But yeah, we see athletes from across Canada, across North America, around the world. They really come from everywhere. So they all have their kind of backgrounds of, you know, even how they're used to their injuries being managed, in their own country versus here, or how they're used to, getting certain treatment for their injuries or however. So it is, I mean, I really do like working, I mean, with obviously all genders. I have a kind of a special piece of my heart for the female team because I do,
Right.
I, like seeing females kind of develop in sport and seeing, now the PWHL and, I just find it so inspiring that, we're seeing kind of more and more opportunities for these female athletes and, uh, and yeah, there's, additional things when we look at um, kind of differences across like ages. For example, like the U15 players, they're kind of in that age group where we're going to see like growth spurts even within a season. So that's an additional kind of factor when we look at like injury management. Um, we have like maybe the U18s who have maybe a larger history of past injuries that we're kind of treating not just acute injuries, but kind of managing kind of chronic stuff moving forward. And yeah, everything kind of in between there. So yeah, I also do like some work on their bench, right? So doing some training on their bench, and yeah, it's again really acute management of injuries, being able to triage and know, okay, are you off the ice? Are we suspecting a concussion had occurred? Are we sending you to emergency or however, right? So
Right.
such a variety and such a wonderful opportunity to work with these players.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, like you said, players coming from many different places. I mean, Pilot Mountain's only gotten more diverse in terms of the players from the different countries they brought in throughout time. And I guess that kind of spurs on this question for myself. But in terms of dealing with these athletes, like you said, every athlete may be used to dealing with an injury a different way compared to how you treat athletes, right? Take me through what that process is like in terms of going through that, explaining to them that this is the way that it should be done.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, right? When we look at the complexities of injury management, so we have, the structure of the body, but then we also have people's beliefs and expectations of their injury. So those two factors, so either like culturally, they're from a different country, but also the culture of the sport. So sometimes a culture of a sport may, and again, I'm coming from the dance world, so I have had the privilege of being quite objective coming into the hockey world. Um, Being able to see, okay, like a lot of the times, yeah, it is that suck it up mentality of that kind of unless you physically can't get yourself off the ice, there's kind of this culture of like, you push through and you play through. So the nice perspective that because I can be a little bit more objective, I can look at things from a way of, okay, well, yeah, you may have wanted to push through this, but I would advise you follow this protocol, right? We have these kind of signs that we are the least likely to cause worse issues or cause persistent injury or chronic issues down the road. So yeah, so the cultural, like again, everyone comes from different backgrounds and history. So um, it's being able to kind of explain, why protocols exist and why we follow kind of as much as possible. Injuries are complex, so as much as possible, kind of a stepwise return to the sport they love. So that, it doesn't keep happening over the season, or that, after the season, they can pursue, you know, whatever they need to, or however, right? Get them playing as many games as possible, but minding their safety first.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, I had a chance to play hockey and actually went to physio to treat injuries near the end of my, I guess, quote unquote playing career because I finished playing competitively after my grade 12 year. But physio can definitely be a huge benefit and a huge help for players. Obviously, it's been a huge help down in Pilot Mountain, Manitoba. But I guess going further into this type of question, but the mental side of things, it's quite depleting, I guess it would be the correct term when, you go through, I guess, constant injuries, or even when you hit that big one, it could have quite an effect on a player's mental health. So from that side of things, talk me through, I guess, that side of it in terms of dealing with the mental side instead of the physical side and being there as, I guess, a way of support for the players too.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, and we see this in multiple populations. Doesn't matter if you're a high level athlete or as someone who, does more just recreational walking, right? It's injuries don't exist just physically in the body. We all have our brain that is what processes what our body experiences. So especially when there is, this short season, a lot of these athletes, they've invested their time and their money to be in an academy. There's the personal pressure they put on themselves to perform their best, to be the best for their team and their teammates. There's the challenge of a lot of these athletes being kids, right? They're teenagers and kids, and someone who's in their 30s with a fully developed brain, compared to a teenager who's going through all the teenage, things that happen in the brain at that age. Like, trying to process injuries can be challenging. I think that's where sometimes there's that pressure. Some athletes I'm having to say, look, like, your coach won't think anything less of you if you take 3 days off of practice to manage your injury properly. Because in perspective, we take those 3 days and then you're more likely to come back smoother, better, stronger when you do come back, compared to putting aside and trying to push through, and then it's aggravated and persistent throughout the season. So it's being able to kind of explain things from that, being able to acknowledge the real challenges that they may have mentally and the struggles that they may be going through with, being out of a game, or being uncertain how long that they'll be out. We can technically give like guidelines on, you may be out for this long. But again, there's so many individual differences. So that's why we have kind of signs that we look for, that there's kind of stages of recovery. One of the biggest predictors, this is really cool science, when we look at concussion management, if someone has a diagnosed concussion, we suspect a concussion had occurred, that one of the biggest predictors that they are going to be kind of recovering optimally and less risk of persistent concussion syndrome. So that's something that can, kind of a chronic symptoms from after a concussion. One of the biggest predictors is being able to follow up with a practitioner, whoever that looks like. Could be physiotherapists, some chiropractors do this, some athletic therapists, doctors, nurse practitioners, however. But having a consistent follow-up with a practitioner after their injury actually is one of the biggest predictors of their recovery. And why they say that is because it helps with the mental component of it. Is decreases catastrophization, which is that over kind of worrying about their injury. That helps with real kind of guidance. And then usually, like as a practitioner, I like to point out not just what's hurting and where their deficits are, but hey, this is good. This is better than last time, or wow, this is better than I expected today. And even that little language of hope and encouragement can really change someone's experience in their injury.
Right, and how you frame wording it is very important because, I mean, in the state that they're in, right, they're more vulnerable. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation in most cases. So I think that's a great way of looking at it, and I think it's great that you've been able to come in and have an objective perspective, not exactly coming from the hockey world, right, coming from the dance world more so, but of course, PMHA's lead physiotherapist. Of course, you have a practice with South Central Physiotherapy. Take us through just to finish things off here, but in terms of what parents can expect exactly when they send their kids to Pilot Mound, of what services you're able to provide specifically, like you talked about, you're there with the teams during game days and stuff when you can be to help assist on ice if anything goes down. But yeah, just a bit more, I guess, clarification on what exactly you provide to the athletes down in Pilot Mound.
Thanks, Graham. Really good question. So one of the primary things that South Central Physiotherapy offers is consultation hours. So what this means is kind of a kind of open door opportunity for athletes to pop their head in and say, hey, you know what, I got hit a little weird during this game. My shoulder hurts. Can you take a look at it? So it's that ability to kind of screen their injuries, because I'm not there with every single game of theirs, especially when they're on the road. So if it's something that they were able to kind of get looked at from the trainer there, used as a little follow-up, or if say they didn't bother them until like a few days after, again, it's that nice kind of check-in that athletes can just have that eye on what's hurting. And then from there, I can kind of give my best recommendations, right? So I don't use that as a time to treat their injuries. That would be kind of a separate appointment, but they pop their head in. I take an assessment and give them advice. You know, I recommend you use like ice heat, or I would, recommend, to the dorm parents, hey, I think, this person would be best seen by a doctor. Can you set up this appointment for them? Or yeah, so that's kind of like the first kind of check-in. Sometimes I'll request that the athletes, follow up with me in a week during consult, so I just can have another look at this and keep an eye on it. Now, from there, if I think that they would benefit from additional treatment, one of the benefits of having the service through South Central Physiotherapy is if they want to book with physiotherapy, they can. So additional appointments, there's 2 of us clinicians that work out of our Pilot Mountain location here. So Candace, who is the one of the business owners, Candace and Whitney are both the owners of South Central Physio. But yeah, my colleague and I will often kind of take turns as needed with the athletes' treatment appointments if they need. And then, yeah, typically the communication back to the parents, to the coaches, it takes that little extra step to say, communicate to, if there's a suspected concussion, communicate to the schools and things like that with the return to learn plan. And for myself as a practitioner, so I have additional training to be able to provide acupuncture. So some athletes prefer that mode of treatment, so that's something I can provide. Otherwise, we work like soft tissue work, massage, manual therapy, joint mobilization, helping their bodies move the best they can. And then obviously the 2 pieces that I really love to focus on is education and an exercise prescription, making sure that they have their therapeutic exercises to keep them going in their injury recovery.
Right, and those exercises quite helpful. I've had a chance to do some before, and they definitely do help. They do work throughout the process of recovery. And yeah, I mean, what physiotherapists are able to do and offer for athletes, I don't think it gets talked about enough, and I think really is appreciated, of course, by the folks down at Pilot Mound and athletes everywhere that you guys in your field are able to provide these types of services on both the physical and mental side. But Julie Medwid, the lead physiotherapist down at Pilot Mountain Hockey Academy, a part of South Central Physiotherapy, joining this edition of the Buffaloes podcast. Great to hear your perspective, Julie, on all of this, and thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much, Graham.
Great to connect with Julie Medwid on this edition of the Buffaloes podcast. It's fun to have players on and coaches, of course, but always fun to get all sides of the story, right? In terms of non-hockey players, whether that's physiotherapists or scouts, as we've had on before, one in particular a few episodes ago. But yeah, great to hear what Julie's able to do for Pilot Mound and through her practice. And yeah, a huge part of Pilot Mound staff there down at the Pilot Mound Hockey Academy. We're going to get into, just quickly, refreshing the teams that are going to be in action this weekend for the Academy. Wouldn't be surprised if some of these games are canceled due to the ongoing weather here. It's closed many parts of highways in Manitoba already, but yeah, we'll update you on what's supposed to happen this week, what's on the schedule at least for Pilot Mountain coming up next on the Buffaloes podcast. Welcome back to the Buffaloes podcast. No graphics to show you today in terms of the games, but we will start off by talking about the U15 Prep Buffaloes. They're supposed to play 3 games in Saskatchewan at Duncan McNeil Arena against the male U15 Prep Notre Dame Hounds, as those will be the final 3 games for the U15s on the schedule for now until they hit the playoffs in British Columbia this season. As for the U17s, they're supposed to be at home coming up for a game tonight and a game tomorrow afternoon against the Indigenous Sports Academy. Both games scheduled at Blackjack Stewart Arena, as they have 2 more games after the scheduled games this weekend on March 6th against Saha, South Alberta Hockey Academy, at Blackjack Stewart Arena, and then again at home to finish things off on March 11th against RHA Winnipeg. All of those games can be seen on Flow Sports, on Flow Hockey, the official broadcaster of the CSSHL. As for the U18 programs, we'll get into them next, as the U18 males, they've, of course, had themselves a very successful season just in terms of continuing to build on their program, and they're supposed to be in Winnipeg this morning to take on RHA Winnipeg. Supposed to be going to Saskatchewan over the weekend to take on Notre Dame, the Hounds, their U18 male prep program. So those games may not happen, but check out PM Buffaloes on their social media platforms like Instagram, like X, formerly known as Twitter, for all of the details. If they do end up canceling games or not, they'd be announced there. And of course, lastly, just taking a look at the female preps on what's up next on their schedule, as they got nothing up until March 8th. So, yeah, weekend off for this team before they reload for one final game on their schedule before the postseason. As it's great to finally be in this time. It's basically postseason in every single hockey league. Of course, still have to wait in the CSSHL until March, which it's crazy. It's going to be March 1st on Sunday coming up. Playoffs are very near. Can't wait to see how the Buffaloes do this season, as last year their teams were able to make finals runs, and one of them was able to take away or come away, as I should say, with a championship banner, and that was the U17 Prep Buffaloes. And what I love about this season, about the Academy, is programs like the U17s, they're striving to finish in Tier 1 this season instead of Tier 2. And of course, the U18s continuing to improve. The U15s have had some great stories, and the female U18 Prep Buffaloes, I mean, if they're placed in, which they will be placed in, that last bracket of playoffs, that last grouping, could potentially surprise some teams if everything comes together for this squad. Maybe some teams may take them lightly just looking at the regular season they've had, but I mean, with players stepping up big time like Rory Perrin, if they're able to get a bit more help around her and other players start to step up and they play to their defensive strategy, you never know. Playoff time is always so unpredictable, sometimes predictable, but most times unpredictable. And I mean, what I can predict is we'll be back next week for another edition of the Buffaloes podcast. That is a certainty. Can't wait for it. Gordie Tumilson and friends will be joining the show. Friends meaning other guests from around Pilot Mound. Until next time, we're going to send you off with Tyson Unro's March of the Buffaloes theme here on your home of Pilot Mound Hockey Academy Hockey on G Show Productions on gshow.ca. Until next time, I've been your host, Graham the G Show Forsyth. Peacing out and waving so long, everybody. Stay safe out there. Enjoy all the great hockey coming your way, and we'll see you in about a week from now. Take care.